Okay. Good to see all of you. As you can imagine, how nice it is to see you each Sunday. It's very encouraging. Teaching's hard work, you know, in spite of what Russ said. Today, the day of smartphones and Google and iPads, people don't just look at the Bible anymore. They break out their 147 version iPad. And, you know, in the Abyssinian version, it says this, and I think you kind of missed it, you know. If you make some reference to history, people look it up on their iPad. They tell you later, hey, you kind of messed that up. It really wasn't in 437 BC, it's in 436 BC. I mean, it's tough teaching now, you know, with all this technology we got. You know. Paul never had to put up with that, you know. Nobody checked the Septuagint on him while he was preaching. Probably didn't even have one, you know. They had to trust him. Well, according to the Septuagint, I can't imagine, you know. But anyway, it's really a challenge and an honor to work through the Word of God with you. We decided to do this my dog who's gone into veterinary business here in case you're looking for an inexpensive veterinarian. He'll take care of you and treat you right. Today, though, we continue our study of the Epistle of Jacob, or James as we call him. We probably won't say Jacob anymore. I think I made my point. That's what it is originally, but so what? You know, we change names, and different cultures have. If you go, like I say, to Spain, he's Diego, or San Diego, of course, is St. James, and all kinds of different variations like that. But the main thing is, this book is one of the earliest books of the New Testament, from my study. And of course, this is not a slam dunk type thing, but there's a great number of very, very conservative scholars who are convinced that this was written sometimes between 42 and, well, maybe not as early as 42, but maybe 45 to about 52. If so, that would make it one of the earliest books of the New Testament. If that being the case, then probably there were not a whole lot of Gentiles in the church at that time. That would come later in the ministries of Paul and what the great work at Antioch and so forth. So it makes sense that James would be mostly addressing Jewish Christians. And of course, you're going to talk to people with that sort of background. You're going to do things a little differently than if you were talking to people from the pagan background. And if you ever notice in the letters of Paul, he has a lot of references to the games. He uses a lot of reference to athletics. He even quotes from some of the poets, Aratus, for example, and some others. And particularly in the address he gives on the Areopagus, or Mars Hill, in Athens, he quotes from a couple of Greek poets. So he's obviously very familiar with the literature of the time, and that comes out in his writings and speeches. James doesn't do that so much because I believe he has more of a Semitic background. And so he's talking about things I think that people from that background are going to maybe need to be more aware of and more conscious of. And so when you add it all up, the Bible's really got something to say to everybody. So what I can get out of it is the sort of practical approach that James uses kind of brings me up short. But one thing about James is that he has this fantastic idea of God, and he shares that idea over and over again, and in the middle of everything that he talks about is a concept of God. So, let me throw a little mystery at you. Now, those of you who just kind of, with your Googles and all, just stay away from this for a few minutes, okay? And this is a flag. This is a flag, okay. And this is a flag of an independent island that is actually under British protection, but it's an independent island. And this is their flag. Now you might say, well, what idiot designed this flag? This flag actually has been around since the 12th century, so it's not new. Now, I'm sure we have people in this class that travel. They're world travelers. They go everywhere. In fact, we have some here that were not too far from this place not long ago. So what is this the flag of? Anybody? I can't believe I stumped you. Yay. You've made my day. Thank you. Now, depending on how you want to pronounce it, this island is off the coast of Scotland and England, and it's called the Isle of Man, or some call it the Isle of Man. Let's go with the Isle of Man, okay. The Isle of Man, and what famous critter comes from this island that many people in America have? The famous cat without a tail called exactly, a Manx cat. All right. Now, you say, well, why do they have this goofy flag? Well, the meaning of this flag, if you look at the Latin quote, is that no matter how you throw us, we're going to still have a leg to stand on. That's honestly the Latin phrase can be translated that way. So no matter which way you throw us, we're going to have one leg, we're going to have a leg to stand on. Now that's kind of the attitude of the book of James, okay? That's why you say, what's the Isle of Man got to do with the book of James? Well, it has to do with throw us any way you want, we're going to come up standing, we're going to be okay. So now you know something you didn't know, okay? This is now I have no idea what the flag of the Isle of Woman looks like, nor do I want to go there. But I'm sure it would be decent, and maybe even more decent than this. So here we have James again, and remember this is a Byzantine picture of James. We don't know if he really looked that way. He's probably right about a couple of things. He's a male. And the other thing is he probably had a beard. Okay. Now, I love the way the Jewish Bible opens James. It's not exactly in consonance with the Greek text, but I like the feeling of it. Yaakov, a slave of God, and the Lord Yeshua the Messiah, to the 12 tribes of the diaspora. Shalom. Actually, it's Greek is Kairein, but that's permissible. Okay. It's a little poetic license, but it's kind of nice. It's the way a Jewish letter would have started. However, the interesting thing is that even though this is a nice Jewish style in this translation, which is more of an accommodation than a translation, this book is written in some of the best Greek of the New Testament. You may say, well, how's that possible? Well, who knows? I mean, is there any law against getting an education, even if you're, a servant of the church? You don't have to be ignorant, right? I mean, you don't glorify ignorance. God doesn't glorify ignorance. Now, remember, God can use an ignorant person, but he can't use his ignorance. So if you're ignorant, fine, the Lord can use you, but he can't use your ignorance, so it's okay for you to learn something. It's not a problem. Now, Myra was talking today, and I was very interested about how students, only 10% knew who Lyndon Baines Johnson was, and at Garfield, forget it. I guess nobody knows who he is, but Myra, I wonder if it hasn't always been that way. If you'd have been teaching 1850, if they'd been the same way. There have been probably people who wouldn't have known who John Quincy Adams was, And maybe there's always only been 10% of people that care enough. I don't know. I'm not an aristocrat about education, but I'm saying I think you have to have a kind of really strong commitment to want to get to where you need to go. So today I want to spend a little time developing this idea in chapter 1 we took a small look at last week and see where we can go about understanding the idea that James puts up about joy in trials. And that's intrigued me because it looks like it's not what you'd think should be said. You would think it would be something different, like up your contribution or read the bulletin or something. Or maybe like a lot of you I know are not Alabama fans in football, particularly after yesterday, I'm sure. Embarrassment in Tuscaloosa. But, the coach down there has been pretty successful, and his name is Saban, Nick Saban. You may have heard of him, I don't know. But he's, last week in his talk that he does on the radio, I only read about this paper, I didn't listen to the talk. I've got better things to do than that. But he said he jumped on a student body for leaving games early. Now, he's already yelled at the football team and straightened them out, and yelled at the administration and got a good raise, and yelled at all the sports writers. So now he's yelling at the fans and saying, some of you are leaving the game before the game's over. And, they were sitting out there in the stands, and they were in the student section. They had signs that said, Nick, we're still here. It's like they obeyed him, How do we get this guy up here, to talk about missions and stuff? I mean, it's he feels free to just, boy, he's taking on the whole outfit now, Now, pretty soon, I suppose, if they're not drinking enough Coke or whatever, or they drink in Alabama, he's going to yell at them about that. But James isn't really yelling at anybody to, hey, people, you need to understand where I'm coming from here, but he puts up an idea. It's sort of paradoxical. Now, you mustn't think that paradox means a dentist and a veterinarian walking down the road together, but you must think of it as kind of a challenge to your thinking. Because I don't think it's totally joyous when I encounter all sorts of trials. I'm not open to that much, so I add, really, as a kind of a caveat to that, really? Is this really true? This is not normal in a way. Now, Meyer alluded to being a teacher, and he teaches history, I believe, American history, and a number of you are teachers, and probably kindergarten on up, and the kindergarten teachers to me deserve far more respect than PhDs teaching university. Believe me, at least they're reasonably under control in the university, not necessarily, but most of the time. Did you ever hear a group of students talking about their schedule, what they're going to take next semester? You ever overhear these conversations, Meyer? Now, I don't recall a conversation, and Kent, you correct me on this, but have you ever heard students say, where is the class where I can really be put to the test and really have a very demanding professor who's going to make me learn something I really need to learn? How many times have you ever overheard that conversation? Zero. How about you, Meyer? Zero, okay. What do you normally hear? Is this professor give many tests? Is she interesting? Does she make the class interesting? Does she get upset if you cut? You think I can get a good grade without working too hard? Those are the kinds of conversations you hear. And so you get up and make these speeches. I've stirred up all the academic community here, and I didn't mean to do that to you, but mostly, do you make the speech sometimes, how many of you here are for an education or for a degree? Well, don't even ask, okay? Because you're not going to get the answer you want. And then they say, well, what's wrong with that? So that's why I said, Meyer, maybe really only 10% are interested. I don't know. Maybe it's just the way it is. Maybe most kids that I know, with all due respect, I don't mean to put anybody down, but we're more interested in getting a good grade than in getting an education. That's just the way it is now. Well, that'll change later, I'm sure, but that's kind of where it is. So when James pops up with this idea, consider it as a totally joyous experience when you encounter all kinds of trials, or we're going to really wonder if isn't there a Christianity where you don't have to do this, Isn't there a less rigid mode? Isn't there Christianity 101, Isn't there a Christianity for beginners, or dummies even, or idiots? I have these books out now that you can buy, and my house is full of them. I've read one the other day about religion for idiots, and after I read it, I was convinced it really was for idiots. So remember our temptometer. Our temptometer in James is, he used the same word for temptation as he does for trial. And my thinking is that a trial comes your way, and that trial can become a temptation for you to shortcut it spiritually or to do something you shouldn't do to get out of it. For example, there's a story of a guy being sentenced to 5 years in a federal pen because he stole about $4 million right here in Nashville. Believe it or not, right here, as Russ was saying, in the buckle of the Bible Belt. He stole $4 million. Well, why? Well, he had this addiction, you see, and he had to feed it. And so that's a lot of people. That's where they are. They justify what they do by saying my needs are superior to ethics or anything like that. I'm not. And so for them, when a temptation comes along, it's just an opportunity. It's not a test of any kind. It doesn't help them in any way. It's just, okay, it's an opportunity, and so forth. So when you think about this, then, you realize that what James is really saying is you got to take the right track. See, you got to get switched over to the right track. And you get on the right track, you're going to encounter. Now, it's like life in a way. As I was telling my good friend Roy Zell back here, if you sail on the seas of life long enough, you're bound to pick up a few barnacles, okay? It's going to happen to you. You're going to have some problem develop. And I wish it didn't come along, but it will. And so how are you? And you say, all the wishing in the world doesn't make it go away. Well, how are you going to react to it? Well, you got to get on the right track, I believe, and understand the purpose of all this in some way to be able to handle it. Now, as we go on thinking about this a little bit, let's surmise, or at least get some kind of idea in our head what we really need by getting on the right track. Well, you notice this idea. James says in verse 4, I'm going to translate what sometimes translated patience as fortitude, and some translate it as endurance. Now, the word endurance over in Galatians 5 and fruit of the Spirit is makrothumia. Makro means long, it means something long, and thumia means a desire, a long desire. Now, most of us have short desires, right? I need it, I want it now, and I'm not going to wait for it, and why isn't it here? Makrothumia means passion for the long haul, okay? So, it's translated endurance, but sometimes people translate patience. But this is not the same word. This is the word hupomene. Now, that's another two words. Isn't it neat how Greek always puts two words together? In fact, there's sometimes they have three words, and I'll let you know when that happens, okay? But hupo means under. Well, you say hypodermic, which means under the skin, right? Think about it. Hypo, under, hupo, dermatos, under the skin. So you get a hypodermic, they're going to stick you with something. So anything with the word hypo in it means you're going to get stuck, probably. Hyper, on the other hand, means too much sugar. As everybody said, it can't. These kids have too much sugar in them. That's why they're acting like they're acting. Well, I had other theological reasons for it myself, but permit fortitude, hupomene. Now, back to hupomene. Under, well, what does mone mean? It means enduring, or it means staying somewhere. In the plural, monai is used in John 14. In my Father's house are many monai, many permanent places, not mansions. There's not a mansion waiting for you up there, dude. Sorry. There's a permanent place. In other words, you've got a home forever. That's the point of it. It's not. There's a mansion now empty. No way, dude. That's not going to happen. You're not going to get a mansion, antebellum or otherwise. You're going to get something better now. You're going to get a place you can never get kicked out of. They're not going to foreclose on that. That's the point. You're not going to say, I can't make the payments. It's already been made for you, okay? The payments are made. You got the deed. Move in. All right. So permit fortitude to do its job of maturing you. You say, well, how can I be mature and be everything that I know that I already am in a sense, but that I can be? How can I be a completely whole person? And James says, well, when you get some trial come your way, look at that as a great opportunity for growth, rather than, oh, no, how did this happen to me? I wanted to take it easy. I didn't expect I have to do it. Yeah. So he says it's attitude. Now, what you need to get to a point where you understand this is called wisdom. And there's only one place to get wisdom, and that's from God. He's got the storehouse for it. He's got wisdom stored up, and he's collected it for eternity, and he was willing to share it. Now, many years ago, when I lived in Baton Rouge, we had a hurricane come through every now and then, and we had a big one come through one time. And we were without power for about a week. And so everybody's food is spoiling and everything. And then suddenly, the government sends in, finally, a huge shipment of dry ice, with that frozen carbon dioxide, right? Am I right about that? Is that what that is, Wayne? Yeah. And, it smokes and all that, and they use it in place. But it's really good to keep your food fresh. And so we found out there was this one place in town. Well, everybody in Baton Rouge went down there. There was a lot around the block, to get your dry ice. You know why we went there? It was the only place in town that had it. We're not like the Irishman, the Irishman who got drunk one day and somebody saw him out there under the street lamp. He said, I'm looking for me watch. I lost me watch. He said, well, where did you lose it? Over across the street. Well, why are you looking here? Well, it's the only place where there's a light. So you got to go to God because that's the only place. Now, people try to get wisdom everywhere else, don't they? Self-help books. In the bar. Oh, it's a great place to look for wisdom in the bar. These guys got so much wisdom to share with you. Is it less filling or is it taste great, you know? That's about as far as you're going to get with most of them, okay. So, God's generosity also has no gotchas. Now, all of us know when we get that phone call, if you answer it anymore, they're getting clever about the way they disguise themselves now so it doesn't just say 800 service. It's got to say something like, you're going to die if you don't answer this. So I got one now. I pick it up and it's a recorded voice. It says, this is so important, don't hang up. Bang! Man, it's not the biggest invitation to hang up I ever had in my life is what they tell me not to hang up. I know no good is going to come of this. So. You know, they say, well, you know, if you sign up for this, oh, man, we're going to, it's going to be great. You're going to get so many blessings. And you sign up for it, big mistake. It's going to cost you more than you ever thought. So those are called gotchas. You know, gotcha, we got you. But God, there's no gotchas with God's wisdom because it says two things about God in this passage, that he is generous and that he gives without any strings attached. Now, imagine for a moment, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but what do you see there? It's getting near this time of the year, right? And so, why would you take candy from this person? Anybody? I mean, have some candy. None of you have a real reason why you wouldn't, right? Okay. Well, I should have made this clearer, but if you look at the fingers of this guy, are they clean or dirty? Very dirty. Now, how desperate would you have to be to take this candy? Okay. You say, you know, the candy may be good, but I'm probably going to get really sick if I do it. You think that way, don't you? You don't just eat anything, do you? You're not my dog, Mimi. It doesn't matter what's on the sidewalk. If I don't stop her, she'll eat it. And she'll regret it later, and so will I when it comes back on the carpet. Okay. And so will Ann. Or what about this? I'll try to make this even more graphic. Yeah, I did. Okay. Take your pills. All right. Now, you likely, if, say, a nurse came to you, you go to one of our excellent doctors, and they say, well, you got to have some pills, and the nurse is going to bring you some, and the nurse comes out, and there's the nurse's hand. Are you going to feel good about taking these pills? Ed said, doesn't matter to me. Give me the pills, right? No. Just kidding. But you know, you're not. You're not, because now God doesn't give you anything with dirty hands. Get the point? I mean, it's obvious. And so there's no strings attached. Almost all the giving that other people do, they will remind you they gave you something. Well, don't you remember the time? And so here's someone you can go to, and it's really more than happy to give you something, and there isn't really anything bad that's going to happen to you. Because as it says, he gives to all generously and ungrudgingly. Now, generously is a little translation of a very simple term, hoplos. It means simply. That is, there's no catch. Get it? There's no catch to the giving. Now, you take something from some people, you're caught, okay? But ungrudgingly means, it's really hard to translate that, but it means something like, when you ask God, he doesn't chew you out for asking. What, you again? What I just gave you one last week. What do you need? You mean you need a new pair of jeans? This is my one daughter, Diane, needed more jeans than a whole chromosomal body of some sort. Daddy, you got to have a new set, but you got 9 pair hanging in your closet. Yeah, but they're not in. Nothing's in. You don't want your daughter going around wearing something that's out of date, do you? Oh, yeah, it doesn't bother me a bit. It bothered her a lot, though. And so I gave it grudgingly. I learned later that wasn't the best strategy. But at a time, you know, when you're a new parent, you say no until they talk you into it. And then if you learn to say yes, if you can show me. See, it's a big difference. Anyway, that's God is kind of like, not what you again, but hey, glad you showed up. I'm more than happy to share this with you. See, James is telling us about the character of God. So if God feels that way about your needs, then he's not going to put you down for praying. You're always welcome. That's a big, big theological point. Now, the problem is you may be a bit of a wimp. I don't know if you can read this cake or not. Probably can't, right? Does anybody recognize that character? And so you don't read this book. What's it called, Sharon? They made a movie out of it, huh? The Diary of a Wimpy Kid? That's the Wimpy Kid, yeah. And you notice what it says, happy birthday. You can't read it, can you? Bob, okay. So I'm a little bit of a wimp at times, you know, like, do I really want to be strong? Do I really want to be this strong, you know? Can a wimp be made strong? And in some way, we're all spiritual wimps, I think we'll have to admit. Do we really want to be strong? And so we got to decide whether we do. Now, if we say, yes, I really do, I'm committed to it, and we say, I'm ready to enter the creative struggle because in a way I know these trials are necessary to develop spiritual muscle. These trials are necessary to develop maturity. I must encounter them. They're going to come anyway, but I must encounter them creatively. That's what James is trying to tell us here. Okay, here's a guy who wants to build up more money. Now, he's doing okay so far from what I can see, but now, what would you say to this man? He says this, I hope this weight makes me stronger. Okay, now do you have any advice for this person? What? Huh? Bigger weight. That's a weight? That's about as heavy as a fountain pen. So I don't know how the guy got muscles like that, but I'm glad he picked up this little weight because it enabled me to use this picture. So the guy's got to do more of this, right, if he wants to get stronger. Now, let's see. Think about your trials that way. If you say, well, I'm ready to take on a really little bitty trial, you're not going to build much muscle that way, right? That's the point. But if you're ready to take on a really big trial and you let the Lord give you the wisdom and the strength to handle it, then that's going to give you the capacity to develop a whole lot more spiritual muscle, you see. Or, to put it another way, in a very odd metaphor that I thought of in the middle of the night, and you just can't trust these too much. Do you know what this is? It isn't important. It's iron ore, okay. Now imagine that if we'll get a little fable here, iron ore had the ability to communicate. I know it doesn't, but, you know, go along with me here and give me a break. So finally it's converted into an iron pellet. Now this is what they do is they process these things. Any of you know about this, you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't already. Well, suppose one of these iron pellets said this, I want to be a trusty sword. You do this in children's book all along. You can play along with it, right? And of course, the other iron pellet will say what? Got to take an antagonistic viewpoint. So the other iron pellet says, you're crazy. Okay. And the reason you're crazy is you'll have a fiery trial. I mean, you just not stay an iron pellet. You're going to have to go through some processing here, right? Now, suppose you say, Lord, I want to be spiritually stronger. Well, what have you really asked for? See what I'm saying? You've asked to test your muscles and to grow your spiritual muscles, and what's going to happen is suddenly, I don't say the Lord's going to send one trial your way because James says he doesn't do that, but these things are going to happen anyway. So what kind of shape are you going to be in to handle that? Are you going to evade it like my students say, where's the easiest professor who gives the least test where I can learn the least but still get a degree? Or, give me the Einstein, and I tell you an F under Einstein is better than an A under some people I know. Now, that's a really hard philosophy to arrive at. But man, you're crazy because you're going to have a fiery trial. And not only that, you're going to get beaten on, shaped. See, that's what happens when you make a sword, right? You get the blacksmith beats away on you. And then, that's a really bad blacksmith there. But boy, and he says, the pellet says, it will be worth it. You've got to I believe we have to get to that point to say, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it to be the kind of person that God wants me to be able to do the work I need to do and help others and to have some spiritual muscle in my life. It'll be worth it. And then, ta-da, it was a real struggle, but what a change. So a long way from an iron pellet to Excalibur. Now, I'm not saying that it's inevitable, but I do think the more we enter into our struggles creatively, with God giving us the wisdom to deal with them in the right way, the more useful we'll be to ourselves and to others, and ultimately to God himself. And though I know you can make many arguments that God really doesn't need us all that much, yet in some strange way, he wants us all that much. All right, so that's pretty good. Now we're ready to really take on evil because we have become equipped with the sword of the Spirit, or the other metaphors that you see in the Bible that describe people who have allowed the Spirit to work in their lives to develop their capacity to be very, very useful people in the kingdom of God. But there's no shortcut to it, obviously, is there? And so as we begin to think about it, we begin to wonder, well, is it really worthwhile? Is it really something I'm ready for? Maybe I just really rather stay a wimp. Now, believe it or not, as Halloween coming up, you can rent or buy, if you have the money, almost any costume in the world. This is a costume of Wimpy. Now, I'm sure that none of you who are younger than roughly 40 remember Wimpy. But Wimpy was a character in Popeye, and Popeye was a sailor man who had a girlfriend named Olive Oil and a crazy animal named Jeep, for whom the Jeep was later named. And he was a one-eyed sailor who ate spinach, okay? Now, do you believe any of this? This really happened, okay? And he had an enemy named... Wow. Meyer just disproved your whole theory right here. He knew Bluto. Bluto! The guy with all the muscles and everything. And of course, Popeye was always delivered by spinach. And that's why if you go down to Central City, Texas, you will see a statue of Popeye, because he promoted the sale of spinach like nobody else, okay? However, Wimpy was no hero, and his favorite saying was, if you will lend me enough money to buy a hamburger on Tuesday, I will gladly pay you back on Wednesday, or something like that. I don't remember. You may remember it exactly. Rodney probably remembers it exactly. But so there is a real choice on taking the right. I don't want to be a Wimpy, and I don't even want to rent this costume. And I don't want, well, I might eat the hamburger, but anyway. So the problem, James says, is here that we can wimp out on this, and it's not going to make it any easier for us if you wimp out. And if you do, you enter into what he calls doubt. Now, there's a strange struggle here, because I really don't think that honest doubt is all that bad, because it means you're struggling with something really big, really great, something profound. And I think God respects that. And you've probably even heard of the poem, there is more faith and honest doubt than there is in 1,000 creeds. I'm sure you've heard that. And that's true. With people who really struggle with big things, big ideas, big problems, I respect that highly. I do myself, don't you? I mean, I still don't understand the Holocaust, you know. I've read Night by Elie Wiesel. I don't understand how that happens. I don't understand how any nation of people could be so mesmerized by a madman that they would take the lives willingly of 6 million people. I still don't understand that. But it doesn't mean I'm going to give up on God because I don't understand. But it does mean that I'm going to have some struggles, and there's nothing wrong with those struggles. But doubt here, I think, is something different. I think it's being an unstable person. In fact, he even uses that term. And he calls these people very unstable, and they're like wind-blown, wind-tossed. So what is it? An unstable person is a person who wants to believe too many things and can't invest in anything. And so there is no norm for their lives. There's no call. There's no sense of a calling. There is no sense of a higher mission for these people. And that really is very defeating when that happens to you, because you end up like, I think Archibald MacLeish said, I've tried to do too many things and I succeeded. So when that happens to you, you see, well, so for that, James says, what you need to do is get a little bit of perspective. What a lot of people do, if you go on to the next verse or two, is they decide that since life is so uncertain and so difficult, they're going to feather their nest as best they can, and they're going to get as much physical security and financial security as they can, because this will solve the problem of encountering difficulties. They'll have security. So James takes that on. He said, you've got to put this all in perspective, because what's really going to happen to you is, instead of you chasing the buck's going to chase you. And then he goes on to say, what you really need are the true riches that give you a sense of equilibrium. Put the whole picture together in this way. And I like the way this is expressed in the New Century Version, and that's a pretty good little version of the Bible. I don't always like it, but this is, I thought, done well. And of course, that kind of levels it out pretty good. Like, do you think then that by getting away from the difficulties you encounter in life and growing to be the really spiritual person, that you can find refuge in physical delight, physical comfort, and in financial security? Well, let me tell you, that's an illusion. It's not going to happen. So, that being so, remember, it's a classic saying, you don't want to be a rat. Okay. So here we are. Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. This is his scepter. They still have it, you see. But where is Charles V? So you've got to live for something that's always going to be alive to you, and that's God and Jesus. You can't live for something that you're going to just leave behind. You live for something who's going to be with you forever. See? And that's what James is really suggesting here, I think. Well, everybody have a great week, I hope. I hope that works out for you, and that you don't eat any candy out of the hands of dirty-handed people. And don't take any pills from nurses who don't wash their hands.